My name is Mattie Monroe. I'm 38 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. But where I'm truly from, is a two-story farmhouse on the outskirts of Fort Collins, where love came with conditions and loyalty was bought with silence. I wasn't born into cruelty, but I was raised in a house where fairness had a favorite. And that favorite was my younger brother, Jacob. If you ever saw me now, presenting at a finance conference in New York City, commanding a boardroom filled with executives 3 times my senior, you might assume I was raised in a family that nurtured success, that I had someone clapping for me from the front row. But you'd be wrong. I was the invisible child, the self-sufficient one. The one who didn't need help, so never got it. And Jacob? He was the fire everyone ran to warm their hands by, even if it burned the rest of us. By the time I was 8, I was making my own lunches, folding my own laundry, walking myself to the school bus. Jacob, 3 years younger, wouldn't get out of bed unless my mother sang to him. At dinner, every topic somehow circled back to him, his behavior, his dreams, his issues, his moods. I was the background character in my own family. When I got into the University of Chicago on a merit scholarship, my mother's only comment was, "Well, I figured you would." But when Jacob got into a no-name private college that barely made regional rankings, they threw a barbecue. My father invited half the neighborhood. There was music. A cake. Balloons. I just stood at the edge of it all, sipping soda and pretending it didn't sting. And I carried that sting for years. I didn't want their approval, but I hated the invisibility. I worked 3 jobs to support myself through college, while my brother got tutoring, rent support, a new car, and a revolving door of second chances. Every failure he had became an excuse for my parents to rescue him, again and again and again. But there was one person who saw me, my grandmother, Evelyn Monroe. She was the kind of woman who didn't raise her voice to command a room, she just didn't need to. People listened when she spoke. A self-made businesswoman, widowed early, she ran the family construction supply company like it was an empire. Every Sunday, she invited me over. Not to coddle me, but to teach me financial literacy, business strategy, negotiation. When I was 14, she handed me her portfolio and said, "Pick 3 stocks you'd invest in. Defend your picks." I chose Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, and a biotech firm I'd read about. She laughed. "You've got it, Mattie. Don't let anyone in this family convince you otherwise." She didn't just believe in me. She prepared me. When she died last year, the loss hit harder than I expected. Not just because I loved her, but because I knew, without her, I was on my own again. At least, that's what I thought, until I got a call from her attorney, Luther DeWitt. "She left you everything," he said. Calm. Direct. Like it wasn't about to light a fuse in the Monroe family. The Telluride house. The investment portfolio. The family heirlooms. All under my name. My brother? He was given $75,000. Contingent on completing a vocational program or launching a real business plan. It was ironclad. No loopholes. And at the end of her will, she left me a handwritten note. "If they try to take this from you, stand firm. This is not a gift. It's a responsibility. I chose you because I knew you wouldn't fold." I folded the letter carefully, hands trembling. Because I already knew what was coming. They wouldn't take this quietly. The snow had just started to fall in Denver when I walked out of Luther's office with the original documents locked tight in my briefcase. I could feel the weight of them, not just legally, but emotionally. This wasn't just property. This was the final act of belief from the only person who ever treated me like I mattered. 3 months had passed since Grandma Evelyn's funeral, and I still remembered the way my mother's fingers tightened every time my name came up during the eulogy. My father barely looked at me. And Jacob. Jacob showed up late, red-eyed but not from grief. I didn't need to ask what he'd been doing the night before. My parents doted on him the entire afternoon, as though he were the surviving spouse and not the grandson who couldn't even show up on time. But they had no idea what Evelyn had planned. Not yet. It was only a matter of time. That time came on a Thursday, mid-afternoon, during a virtual conference with a hedge fund in Boston. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Just 6 words. Family meeting. Sunday. It's important. No greeting. No smiley face. Just flat, clinical words that felt more like a courtroom summons than a family invitation. I didn't respond. Later that evening, Veronica, my best friend and partner at the firm, came by my office with 2 lattes and a suspicious look on her face. She raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. Jacob again? I sighed and handed her my phone. She read the message and let out a low whistle. Let me guess what it's about, she said, sipping her coffee. Jacob's in debt, your parents are panicking, and they need the golden goose to lay just one more egg. I didn't laugh. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder I hadn't looked at in weeks. Password protected. Buried beneath layers of encrypted finance logs. There's more, I said. Someone tried to access Grandma's portfolio 2 weeks ago. Failed login attempt. IP address traced to Fort Collins. Veronica narrowed her eyes. Your parents? Has to be, I said. Or someone they're working with. That night, I stayed late. I pored over documents, drafts, old email threads. And that's when I saw it, in my spam folder. An email from an address I didn't recognize, blowinfo.assist@gmail.com. Subject, Monroe Asset Transfer Plan, Internal Draft. My heart dropped. I clicked. Inside was a 13-page PDF. It proposed a Monroe Family Stability Fund. The intent was clear. Consolidate all of Evelyn's real estate, investments, and heirlooms under one shared family trust, with me removed as the primary beneficiary. Co-trustees? Henry and Denise Monroe. Beneficiary? Jacob. My name wasn't mentioned until the very end, in a handwritten note scanned onto the page. Mattie will resist at first. But mention Jacob's safety. She'll fold. She always does. I sat frozen. The words kept replaying in my head. She'll fold. She always does. They still thought I was the same scared girl who kept her mouth shut and picked up after everyone else. The girl who stayed quiet during every family dinner while they praised Jacob for his potential. They didn't know I'd changed. And they were about to learn. I left my office that night in silence. No music. No calls. I didn't even stop for dinner. Instead, I drove straight to Fort Collins. I still had a key to the house. Leftover from the days I house sat every winter while they vacationed in Palm Springs. I parked on the street and walked around the side, slipping in through the kitchen door. The house smelled the same, like linen spray and suppressed memories. My father's office light was on. I crept down the hallway, keeping my footsteps silent. There it was. The full file, lying wide open on his desk. I scanned the pages quickly. The trust documents. The asset transfer plan. A draft email to a new attorney. At the bottom of one folder was a manila envelope labeled Jacob's debt. I opened it. Inside, $320,000 worth of debt. Gambling losses. High-interest credit cards. And a final entry, circled in red ink. Private loan. Non-bank source. Due in 30 days. Loan sharks. I took photos of everything. I didn't touch a single paper. I just left it all exactly as it was. When I got back to Denver, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I started making moves. By 6 a.m., I had booked an appointment with a woman named Avery Klein, a high-stakes estate lawyer known for being brutal, brilliant, and absolutely untouchable. The kind of woman who didn't play nice. Exactly what I needed. When I walked into her office the next morning, on the 18th floor of a downtown Denver skyscraper, she didn't shake my hand or ask about my day. She just looked at the file I slid across her desk and said, "This your family?" I nodded. She flipped through 3 pages before speaking again. "You're going to need protection. Real protection. I can move everything, assets, accounts, titles, into a secure trust with zero access except through you. You'll be invisible by the time they even think to lawyer up. But we need to move fast. You have 3 days. Tops. Start now," I said. And she did. By noon, my grandmother's estate was in transition. Her Telluride property was being retitled under a legacy trust. The jewelry was scheduled for secure storage. The stock portfolios were locked into an irrevocable fund, with me as the sole controller. No one, not my parents, not Jacob, could touch it. By day 3, everything was sealed. And just in time. Because on the morning of the 4th day, I got a text from my father. "Please review the attached and sign. We'll move forward after." Attached, a PDF titled Asset Authorization. They wanted me to hand over control. They actually thought I'd do it. I didn't respond. Not by text. Not by phone. I'd say what I had to say in person. Because Sunday was coming. And I wasn't walking in as their daughter anymore. I was walking in as the gatekeeper. Sunday arrived with a cruel chill in the air. A gray, bone-deep kind of cold that seeps in even when you're wrapped in wool and resolve. I arrived at my parents' house precisely at 3 p.m. Not a minute early, not a second late. This wasn't a reunion. It was a reckoning. The driveway already held my father's black Range Rover and Jacob's leased Dodge Charger, the one he couldn't afford but still clung to like it proved something. I parked at the curb. My heels hit the concrete with measured intent. I wasn't coming as the obedient daughter or the overlooked sibling. I was coming as the executor of Evelyn Monroe's true legacy. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, dressed like she was hosting a garden party, emerald velvet, pearls, a soft smile. "Mattie, you made it," she said, stepping aside like this was just another Sunday brunch. I walked past her without a word. Inside, the living room looked staged, like a set piece for a play I'd seen too many times. The velvet couches were fluffed, the fireplace flickered, and at the center was the coffee table, glass-topped and glinting under the chandelier, with a folder neatly laid out. My father sat on one side, suit jacket draped over the back of the chair, white button-down shirt perfectly pressed. His reading glasses rested low on his nose. Jacob sat beside him, in a wrinkled hoodie and jeans, arms crossed, eyes already defensive. "Let's begin," I said, still standing. "I don't have long." My father cleared his throat like he always did before slipping into lawyer mode. "Mattie, we called this meeting because the family is in crisis." "Call it what it is," I interrupted. "Jacob is drowning in debt, and you want me to bail him out." No one responded at first. My mother tried first, her tone carefully measured. "Your brother made mistakes. But he's trying to make things right." Jacob looked up with hollow eyes. "I joined a support group. I didn't even blink. That's not going to erase $443,000 in liabilities. Especially when some of it is from unlicensed sources." My father's jaw clenched. "So you've been looking into our affairs?" "I've been protecting what Grandma left behind," I said. "Which, for the record, you're actively trying to dismantle." "Mattie," my mother said, her voice dropping to that faux soft register she used when manipulating. "This is about family. Jacob's in danger. There are people who—" "I know," I said. "And that's why I've taken precautions. I pulled the manila folder from my bag and placed it gently on the table. This, I said, is confirmation of the EM Legacy Fund. All properties, portfolios, and physical assets are now in a double-locked irrevocable trust. Protected from lawsuits. Protected from transfers. Protected from you. Jacob sat up like someone had smacked him. What the hell do you mean? I mean the game is over. My father picked up the folder, flipping through with increasing agitation. His eyes paused on the signature page. This is notarized. Of course it is, I said. Everything's been filed. Your plan to create a family fund, I saw the draft. I saw the part where you said I'd fold. My mother's face fell. You read that? Yes, I said. I read it all. The draft. The emails. The debt records. The attempted unauthorized login to Evelyn's account. My father leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing. You've gone behind our backs. I smiled. No. You went behind mine. I just caught up. Jacob stood suddenly, knocking over a glass of water. This is unbelievable. I'm your brother. No, I said. You're a grown man who's been living on borrowed time and borrowed money. This isn't about love. This is about boundaries. My mother reached out, placing her hand over mine. Mattie, you're strong. We know that. But surely you're not heartless. Jacob is your blood. I gently removed her hand. Blood doesn't mean I owe him my future. Jacob scoffed. So what now? You just let me die? No, I said. I let you live, with consequences. The silence in the room felt thick, like wet cement. I've arranged for you to be admitted into a treatment program, I said. Cedar Path Recovery Center. 90 days. Fully paid. If you complete the program and show consistent progress, I'll help negotiate the legal portion of your debt. But I won't pay a cent toward any loan shark or gambling tab. And if I refuse? Jacob asked, his voice almost a whisper. Then you're on your own, I said. My father stood. This is coercion. No, I replied. This is the first time someone in this family has said no to chaos. I'm not here to debate. I'm here to draw the line. Jacob's mouth twisted, torn between rage and shame. My mother looked like she might cry. My father's face was stone. But I didn't flinch. This is what Evelyn wanted, I said. Not for her assets to be drained by repeat failure, but to be protected by someone who knows the cost of silence. No one spoke. The grandfather clock ticked behind us, loud and slow. I'm done being the quiet one, I said. I turned to leave. My heels clicked across the hardwood, the weight of the moment trailing behind me like a shadow. I didn't look back. Not when my mother called my name, not when Jacob muttered something under his breath. Outside, the wind had picked up. The trees shivered. I stood by my car, hand on the door, heart still racing. For the first time in decades, I had stood up for myself. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. But for peace. 3 days after I walked out of that house, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mattie? The voice was low, familiar in a strange way. This is Thomas. Thomas Monroe. My blood ran cold. Uncle Thomas. My father's older brother. The one no one ever talked about unless it was in clipped, bitter phrases. Growing up, I barely saw him. By the time I hit high school, he was already a ghost in the family, the traitor, as my dad had once muttered when I asked. I know this is unexpected, he continued. But Luther gave me your number. Said you were dealing with a complicated situation. Understatement of the century. I agreed to meet him that afternoon at a quiet cafe in Southridge, a few blocks from my firm. I didn't know what to expect. maybe another family ambush. But I couldn't ignore him, not now. He looked older than I remembered, with deep creases around his eyes and a neatly trimmed gray beard. But his gaze was sharp. Steady. Honest. He slid a thick envelope across the table before I even sat down. Inside is everything you need to understand how this started. It didn't begin with Evelyn's will. It didn't even begin with Jacob's gambling. I didn't open it yet. Tell me, I said. Thomas sighed, stirring his tea slowly. When Jacob was a sophomore at Stanford, he racked up $40,000 in gambling debts. Sports betting, poker, online casinos. You name it. He borrowed from some very dangerous people. Your parents panicked. They didn't want the family name tarnished, so they remortgaged the Fort Collins house and paid it off quietly. My stomach tightened. I never knew. Of course not, Thomas said. Because you didn't ask for anything. You were too busy building your own life. And that gave them the perfect excuse to never tell you. He looked out the window for a moment before continuing. Then came the bar in Greeley. Lasted 6 months. Total disaster. They covered that too. Then a car rental company. More loans. More cover-ups. Over the years, they emptied their retirement accounts. Took out high-interest personal loans. Sold off valuables. They've been waiting for Evelyn's estate to save them for years. I finally opened the envelope. Inside were copies of bank statements, mortgage contracts, stock transfer forms, and records of cash advances, all signed by my parents. Each document a blade cutting through the illusion I'd spent years pretending was real. This, I whispered, this is why they fought so hard. They were never trying to save Jacob. They were trying to save themselves. Thomas nodded slowly. Your father, he always needed to feel in control. But Jacob was his blind spot. He couldn't see the damage. I stared down at the stack of paper. And you? I asked. Why did you leave? Thomas sipped his tea. Because I realized I couldn't stop them. I invested with your father once. When the venture tanked, I suggested we sell early to cut losses. He refused. Said he needed Jacob to stay on as a founding partner. He chose his pride over logic. Over me. And we both lost everything. He paused. But Evelyn, she kept in touch. She knew you were the only one strong enough to stop this. My throat tightened. I thought of all those nights I stayed up alone in college, paying my way through a world that never gave me a leg up. I thought of my grandmother's hands guiding mine over spreadsheets, of her quiet nods every time I got something right. She always said, Thomas murmured, Mattie doesn't just understand money. She understands purpose. I blinked back tears. He pushed a second envelope across the table. This is my contact at a forensic accounting firm. If they try anything else, anything, you'll be ready. I nodded, speechless. That night, I sat at my desk, the city lights of Denver twinkling beyond the glass windows, and I sent a short, cold message to my parents and Jacob. Sunday. 10 a.m. My apartment. Mandatory. Full attendance. No replies. But I knew they'd come. Because this time, I wasn't the one begging for a seat at their table. They were coming to mine. Sunday came fast. I wore all black. Not for mourning, but for war. My penthouse apartment wasn't cozy. It was sharp. Clean. Strategic. And in the middle of the long glass table sat 3 folders, 2 glasses of water, and a laptop manned by Avery Klein herself. She didn't smile when my parents walked in. She just nodded. My mother wore a navy dress with gold jewelry, her lips perfectly painted. My father wore a full suit. Jacob came in a hoodie, hands stuffed in his pockets, eyes already glassy with exhaustion. Let's get to it, I said. They sat. No hugs. No greetings. No apologies. I began. This meeting has one purpose: to establish boundaries. Financial, emotional, and legal. If you're not ready for that, there's the door. Silence. First, I said, turning to Jacob, you've been enrolled in an inpatient program at Cedar Path. 90 days. Fully paid. If you complete it and show consistent progress through clinical evaluations, I'll help restructure your legal debts. But I will not pay anything illegal. Not a single dollar. Jacob looked like he'd been slapped. You're putting me in rehab? You put yourself there. My father leaned forward. This is absurd. You can't dictate his life. No, I said. But I can dictate what I do with mine. And with Evelyn's legacy. I slid a second folder across the table to my parents. This is a restructuring plan for your finances. It involves selling the Fort Collins house, consolidating loans, and ending all new borrowing. You'll move to a smaller place. Live within your means. That's your path forward. My mother inhaled sharply. That house was built with love. That house, I cut in, was mortgaged 3 times to pay off your son's failures. It's a monument to denial, not love. I turned to Jacob. You asked what happens if you fail. I'll tell you. Nothing. Because I won't be there to catch you. His voice cracked. So you're just cutting me off? No, I said gently. I'm giving you a real chance. But if you throw it away, that's your choice. The room fell quiet. Then Avery spoke, calm and cold. Any attempt to access the EM Legacy Fund without consent will be met with immediate litigation. The fund is secured. The records have been notarized. And any future misrepresentation will be treated as criminal fraud. I looked at my parents. You taught me how to survive without love. Now I'm teaching you how to survive without control. My mother wiped away a tear but said nothing. My father tapped the table. A small, rhythmic sound. But they didn't argue. They knew they'd lost. When I ended the meeting, they filed out one by one. Jacob lingered, eyes wide, hands shaking. When's the check-in? He asked quietly. Monday. He nodded, then walked away without another word. I watched them go. Not with anger. Not with hate. Just peace. Finally, peace. The following Monday, as the sun broke through the snow-dusted skyline of Denver, I drove Jacob to Cedar Path Recovery Center. He sat beside me in silence, hands tucked between his knees, eyes staring straight ahead like he didn't want to see anything, especially not me. We didn't speak much. And I didn't push him to. When we pulled up to the modern, sprawling facility nestled against the pine-covered foothills, he finally turned toward me. I don't know who I am without all the noise, he admitted. You'll find out, I said, voice steady. Or you'll stay lost. But this time, it's your choice. He didn't respond right away. Then, in a low voice, thanks for not throwing me away. Even though you had every reason to. I didn't reply. I just watched him walk up the steps, staff already waiting, clipboard in hand. When he disappeared behind those glass doors, I sat in the car a moment longer, heart heavy, not from pity, but from the weight of clarity. Jacob's recovery wasn't my responsibility. But I'd given him the final rope. What he did with it was up to him. Back in Denver, I kept to myself. The phone calls from my parents dwindled down to once every 2 weeks. Short. Civil, measured. They were adjusting to their new lives in a modest apartment in Littleton. Gone were the cocktail parties and vacations. My mother enrolled in a cooking class. My father worked part-time at a younger law firm. They still carried pride like armor, but it was dented now, no longer invincible. I didn't visit. Not because I was bitter, but because boundaries are not a punishment. They're a declaration of value. One cold morning in December, while organizing my grandmother's books in the restored reading room of the Telluride house, I found it. A small, velvet box tucked inside the bottom drawer of her secretary desk. Wrapped in ivory ribbon. No tag. Inside was her emerald necklace, the one she only wore for formal occasions, and underneath it, a folded letter sealed with red wax. My name was written in the slanted, deliberate penmanship I knew better than my own. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dear Mattie. If you're reading this, it means you stayed strong. It means you chose integrity over guilt. I didn't leave the estate to you because of your career or your numbers. I left it to you because you understand something the others never did. That money is not for comfort. It's for courage. Legacy isn't in what we hand down. It's in what we refuse to give away too easily. The world will always try to barter your silence. Don't sell it. Love always. Evelyn. Tears spilled before I could stop them. Quiet and full. Not out of pain, but from something deeper. Something like validation. Like relief. Later that evening, as snow began to fall, I walked through the house Evelyn left behind. Every piece of wood, every glass pane, every heirloom was preserved as she requested. It didn't feel like a prize. It felt like a promise, kept. A week later, I received a voicemail. It was Jacob. I'm out now. Staying in Boulder, working at a nursery. It's simple, but I like the quiet. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say I'm still here. Still trying. I didn't call back. Not right away. But I listened to that voicemail twice. Because some wounds don't heal with forgiveness. They heal with time. With space. With truth. And Jacob, for the first time, wasn't lying to himself. He wasn't leaning on anyone. That was enough for now. By January, the Telluride house had become more than a sanctuary, it was a symbol. Not just of Evelyn's legacy, but of mine. The renovations were finally complete. I had honored every note she left behind, the red oak railings, the restored stained glass above the kitchen window, the brass fixtures in the reading room. The place breathed with her memory. But it stood tall with my resolve. I hosted no parties. I invited no family. This house wasn't for show. It was a quiet fortress against everything that once tried to break me. On the third Thursday of that month, I got a package in the mail. It was from Jacob. No letter. Just a small wooden box and a note on top. No expectations. Just wanted you to have this. Inside was a hand-carved bonsai pot. He must have made it during his recovery program, its edges imperfect, but sturdy. On the bottom, etched into the wood, were the words. Still growing. I sat with it in my lap for a long time, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Jacob had always been the storm everyone shielded. And for once, it seemed he had learned to weather his own thunder. I sent a short message back. Take care of the roots. That's where the healing starts. No more. No less. That weekend, I visited Evelyn's gravesite alone. I knelt by the headstone, brushing away a thin layer of snow with my gloved hand. The words carved into the granite read. Evelyn Monroe, builder. Believer. Protector. And for the first time, I felt I belonged to those same words. I told her everything about the letters, the confrontation, the trust, Jacob's rehab, and the home now standing as she wanted. I spoke as if she were sitting right there, sipping tea beside me, nodding the way she always did when I found my way through something hard. Before I left, I pulled a folded piece of paper from my coat. A letter I had written but never sent. Addressed to her. You were the only one who ever saw me. And when you left this world, you still saw me. You taught me that standing your ground doesn't make you cruel. It makes you clear. And now I understand that protecting your legacy wasn't about holding on to money. It was about holding on to myself. Thank you for never asking me to shrink. I placed the letter at the base of the stone and pressed a small pine branch beside it. The sky above was vast and blue, the clouds barely moving. And for a moment, everything felt still. Settled. No longer spinning around someone else's crisis. When I got home that evening, I lit a fire in the reading room and sat in her old leather chair. The same one she always used. On the table next to me was the photo I'd framed weeks earlier, me and her at age 16, side by side during a tour of the regional stock exchange in Denver. She was smiling. Not the polite kind of smile. The proud kind. And I finally understood why. Because now I was living as the woman she always knew I could become. Spring came late to Telluride that year. Snow still clung to the tree branches as April neared, like winter was reluctant to loosen its grip. But inside my home, the light had changed. It wasn't just the way the sun filtered through the old stained glass windows, it was what had settled inside me. Peace, finally. Not the kind that comes after winning. The kind that comes after choosing yourself. One morning, while reorganizing some of Evelyn's old files, I got a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. No deliveries, no calls. When I opened it, there stood Jacob. He looked different. Not perfect. But grounded. His posture was straighter, his clothes clean. No trace of the usual desperation in his eyes. I called last week, he said. Didn't leave a message. Figured it was your choice. I stepped aside without saying a word. He walked in slowly, looking around like he didn't quite believe I'd let him. I didn't come to ask for anything, he said. Just wanted to see it. What she left behind. I nodded, leading him into the reading room. He stood still, eyes taking in every detail, the fireplace, the old lamp, the leather chair. She always said this house was more than wood and stone, he whispered. It is, I replied. He turned to me. I'm working at the nursery full-time now. They're training me to manage orders. I even helped a kid apply to college last week. He reminded me of me. Before everything. There was silence between us. Then he said the words I never expected. I'm sorry, Mattie. For all of it. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know, Evelyn chose right. It hit me harder than I thought it would. I didn't hug him. I didn't cry. But I nodded. And in that one small gesture, something old between us cracked, and maybe, something new began. Before he left, he paused at the door. I'm going to pay back what I can, he said. Even if it takes 10 years. I gave him a soft smile. Start with yourself. That's what she would have wanted. When the door closed behind him, I exhaled slowly, like I'd been holding my breath for most of my life. Later that night, I found myself standing at the threshold of the upstairs study. The last room Evelyn had ever used before her health declined. I opened the closet and found a slim envelope taped to the back of the door. My name written in thick black ink. Inside was a final note, short and scrawled. If they come for you, remember. You don't owe anyone your peace. You are not selfish for choosing stillness over sacrifice. I tucked the note into my journal. I didn't need to read it again. The words had already taken root. That week, I announced the launch of the EM Legacy Fund publicly, a non-profit dedicated to providing grants for women in underserved communities looking to enter finance and business. I did it in her name, not for show, but for truth. Because money doesn't change the world. What you do with it does. At the press event, someone asked me, what inspired this? I smiled. A woman who taught me how to grow money. But more importantly, how to grow a spine. As the cameras flashed and the applause rang out, I felt it deep in my chest. Not pride. Not vindication. Just a quiet, unshakable sense of self. I no longer needed their permission. Not to lead. Not to succeed. Not to exist. And as I stood outside the venue that night, wind gently brushing past my cheeks, I whispered to no one, "I kept your promise, Grandma." And I made my own. Mattie's story isn't just about inheritance. It's about reclaiming identity from a family that only saw value in her silence. It's a reminder that drawing boundaries isn't cruelty, it's survival. And that real love sometimes means saying no, even to those who share your blood. She didn't choose revenge. She chose legacy. And that choice changed everything. What would you do if your family tried to take everything from you? Would you have the courage to protect what's yours? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge.